particularly critical decision that you assisted General Kwibompo with during that period?
Yes, there is one that stands out. Remember I stated that there was this Major Jebo that...
What's his name?
Jebo.
How do you spell that, please?
It's J-E-B-O, if I'm not right. I stand corrected on that. A commander of another formerly trained group that still had not shown up. We now have a situation where it is believed that he just might stage a counter coup. And so most of his men are being, are rounded up and brought into the barracks. They are there for fear that they just might do something. On the other hand, we have intelligence coming in telling us that the rest of the officers' corps of the armed forces of Liberia are themselves planning a comeback. Now, we are in a dilemma here where you arrest these very trained men because you are afraid of Major Jebo, but you still have, on the other hand, a group of men that could equally do you harm. So the critical situation that occurred was that I advised that those men be released and then encouraged to begin to put up the security corridor that was necessary. Now, let me just make this clear. In the armed forces of Liberia, as I guess in most armed forces, you have basic trained soldiers and you have specially trained soldiers. The group that is commanded by Major Jebo is formally trained and is called the Strike Force. The new group that just staged the coup is another group. They call themselves the Special Forces, and they have just finished the training with what they call live ammunition, and they were just about the best trained. So what we sought to do then was to bring the strike force in, encourage them instead of arresting them and using them to possibly counter any other situation that might have come up.
Mr. Griffiths, before you proceed, may I clarify a word used by Mr. Taylor? On page 5, line 9, it's recorded as formerly, meaning previously, and he has spoken of some people that were trained. And on page 6, line 11, it's formally, meaning properly trained or going through a proper procedure. I would just like to clarify which word Mr. Taylor intended.
Well, I'm using formally as to indicate something that had happened before.
Madam Court Attendant could note that for the record.
Now, did President Talbot have a son, Mr. Taylor?
Oh, yes, he did. He had a son, and his name was A.B. Talbot, Jr.
Was he married?
Yes, he was married.
To whom?
He was married to the goddaughter of the president of La Côte d'Ivoire.
What was her name?
Her name was, well, her name is Daisy. She's still alive. I remember in my statement on yesterday, I did mention that after the death of Talbot, who was chairman of the OAU, some of the tensions that came up was as a result of him being the chairman of the OAU, but equally so, like Cote d'Ivoire became anxious because of the presence in Liberia still of the president's, what we call it goddaughter, but it's almost in Africa, it's just about your daughter, was also of concern to him, and this was causing more trouble. So he was married to the daughter, I would say.
So the daughter was in Liberia at the time of the coup. Is that right?
That is correct.
And help us, did anything in particular occur in relation to her?
Oh, yes.
What was that?
On or about the third day of the coup, while we are sitting in the commanding general's office, and I say, why are we? Again, let me just say who we are. I'm there, my fiancé is there, and other members of the council. A lady is brought in, and I still remember very, very clearly, in a very yellow dress, and she appears to be pregnant, and she's fair in complexion, and she's really, really stressed out, and I say, but who is this lady? And they say, oh, this is A.B. Talbot's wife. But I was still in the United States, and I remembered that A.B. Talbot was married to the daughter of the president of La Cote d'Ivoire. And I said immediately, I said, oh, General, we can't touch this woman. Turn her over immediately to the Ivorian ambassador. And quickly he said, okay, fine. And I personally, along with my fiancée, escorted Daisy to the Ivorian embassy, and I turned her over to the ambassador.
And what happened to her after that?
She was immediately thereafter, the president of La Cote d'Ivoire asked permission for an aircraft to come in. He sent in an aircraft, and she was picked up and flown to Abidjan.
And help us. To which country did Doe make his first official overseas trip?
To the best of my recollection, it was to La Cote d'Ivoire.
Now, meanwhile, what happened to Talbot's son?
A.B. Talbot managed to take refuge, apparently, and I must say here apparently because news stories put him at several different places, but finally he ended up at the French embassy accredited near the capital. He was there for a very long time. I would say close to about a year, and intelligence reports, and finally, I think it was a cook, and I'm virtually sure, because I'm sure using the word "think" in the transcript may not be proper. I'm sure that a cook at the embassy revealed to a friend that there was something funny at the embassy, that food was being prepared and taken into one section of the embassy, and they had no access, and there were whispers that A.B. Talbot was there. And very sadly and unfortunately, before some of us who knew better could intervene, and quite frankly, I must say General Kuwankpa was not a part of this. If not, he probably would have listened. Orders were given, and the French embassy was stormed by orders from the chairman of the council, Samuel Doe. The embassy was broken into against the protests of the ambassador, and A.B. Talbot was taken out of the embassy forcibly, kept at the central barracks prison for several months, and later executed.
And help me, as far as you're aware, how did the president of the Côte d'Ivoire feel about the death of his son-in-law?
Oh, quite frankly, President Houphouët-Boigny and that's one name that I'm going to depend on you guys to do that. It was very, very, not just upset, but sad. Imagine your daughter crying on your shoulder. Her husband has just been taken out and executed. It was a very, 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 very sad picture. In fact, it was very serious because after Abiy was taken from the embassy, there were pleas to save him from not just the president of La Côte d'Ivoire, but from so many diplomatic sources. But the senior members of the council decided that they would not have any of that, and that their biggest concern was that, in fact, Houphouët-Boigny said, well, let me send for him. I gave him to me. And they felt that Abiy had the capacity, leaving the country to mount a comeback for his father. And so they decided that they would not let him live.
Now, I ask you about these details for a reason, Mr. Taylor. In intervening on Daisy's behalf, in ensuring that the president of Côte d'Ivoire was reunited with his daughter, did that prove useful to you at a later stage?
I would say extraordinarily useful. Daisy did explain to her father my personal intervention and that of my fiancé, and he was very pleased. And over the years, in fact, during the years of government, President Houphouët-Boigny never forgot it. And when we launched our revolution in Liberia, at some point, not at the beginning, at some point, that paid off in that he was somewhat, probably I can describe as being sympathetic to what we were doing, and I can only speculate, and I'm sure it would not be useful, that you know, seeing Doe in trouble meant that at least at long last he would, you know, was getting his pound of flesh back from Doe, I guess.
And help us. From which country did you launch your revolution in Liberia?
We launched our revolution from La Côte d'Ivoire, and I want to emphasize here, without the knowledge and or consent of the Ivorian government. In fact, I mentioned previously in my testimony that we had to buy hunting guns, 12-gauge shotguns, from La Côte d'Ivoire, from ordinary markets. And even after the revolution was launched, I was being sought by Ivorian authorities. So to the extent that we launched it from La Côte d'Ivoire, they knew nothing, absolutely nothing about it.
One other detail, you mentioned A.B. Talbot taking refuge in the French embassy. The French embassy where?
Accredited near Monrovia.
And one spelling, Houphouët-Boigny, H-O-U-P-H-O-U-E-T, Boigny, B-O-I-G-N-Y. Now, how long did you remain in the barracks with Quiwampa, Mr. Taylor?
I remained in the barracks for 3 months. If I may just, Your Honors, clarify one thing, because I'm sure Your Honors may know. When I say accredited near, it does not mean that the embassy is outside. It's just what we learned, the diplomatic terminology, or phrase you may call it, that embassies are accredited near capitals. So when I say accredited near, it doesn't mean that they're outside of Monrovia. They're in Monrovia.
Okay.
Very good. I remained in the barracks for 3 months.
And during that 3-month period, you've explained how you were proffering your advice to General Kwiwompa. But did you have any formal post within the PRC?
No, no. At the time, no. I was just considered the leader of the group from America, helping in the barracks with no formal position.
Did there come a time when that situation changed?
Yes, it did.
When?
Some 3 months, as I mentioned, after the revolution, one day we are sitting in the Commanding General's office, General Kwiwompa, and he says to me in typical Kwiwompa form, "Oh, Taylor, do you have a job?" I said, "No." He said, "Oh, my God, but all the jobs are gone." So I said, "Well, no, I have learned that there is a post still available. The Director Generalship of the General Services Administration is opened." So he said, "Okay, great, then come, let's go." And then he took me straight to the executive mansion to the chairman, Master Sergeant Doe, and said to him, "Taylor has been working with us and he doesn't have a job." And then Doe said, "Oh my God, you still don't have a job?" I said, "No." And then he said to him, "Well, he just told me that there's a position open." And so Doe said, "Well, would you like that position?" I said, "I don't mind. I'll work in wherever you send me." And he said, "But that is not a ministerial position." I said, "No, it's a director generalship." So then he says to me, "Well, okay, well, we'll make it a ministry, or at least raise it to a ministerial level." The title remained the General Service Administration, but I was raised to ministerial level, where I could attend cabinet meetings, and then because of my special status as the leader from America, I was invited then to begin attending council meetings.
Now, what was the purpose of the General Services Agency, or GSA?
Yes, the General Services Administration is modeled after that of the United States. They are responsible for the procurement of government properties. I would say the procurement and the maintenance of those properties. That is, all, whether it is from a pencil to a ship, they're purchased by the General Services Administration Agency.
And did you have a deputy in that role?
Yes, I did. I had a deputy that was brought on by me by the name of Blamo Nelson. That's B-L-A-M-O-H, Nelson as in N-E-L-S-O-N.
And was he brought on at your request, or was he foisted on you by the administration?
He was brought on by my request. Blamo Nelson worked with me as Secretary General to the Union of Liberian Associations in the Americas, ULA, that we spoke about previously. He had worked with me in the United States for so many years, but had come to Liberia before 1980 and worked at the Ministry of Finance. So he was an old union hand, and union, that is, again, U-L-A-A, an old union hand that I felt that we needed. This is a man who really loves papers. He loves working with paper and paperwork. And so I felt he could be very, very useful at the agency as my deputy. I requested that. It was granted, and he came on as my deputy.
Can we pause for a moment?
Excuse me, he's presently a senator in the Republic of Liberia.
Yes, can we pause for a moment and seek your assistance with one matter? Can you set out for us, please, the form of the government after the coup, what was the main governing body?
The main governing body after the coup was the People's Redemption Council. These were the men that staged the coup.
And how many members did that council have?
The council had 20 full members. It increased after certain progressives were permitted to attend the meetings, but the council remained steady. About 20 members that were full-fledged members of the council.
And who was the chairman of the council?
The chairman of the council was the most senior non-commissioned officer, Master Sergeant Samuel Kanyon Doe.
And so far as the cabinet was concerned, of which you became a member, how many cabinet ministers were there?
I'm going to have to do a little bit of calculation. There was not a very large cabinet. I would say a little under 20. I could name them, but I'll have to calculate them. I can name them. I just don't remember the number. But
Very well. Now, from which parts of the political spectrum in Liberia were they drawn?
as I look at the framework right now, it was not from a very wide spectrum, because when you look at the cabinet, there may have been about, I would say, one person that I can almost say was from the Americo-Liberian, another half of a person, and what I mean by half of a person, because I was on the cabinet, but I was not a fully Americo-Liberian, because I'm half and half. But the rest of them were from the Aborigine population.
And in terms of political complexion, was there any kind of split or divide within the cabinet?
Oh, definitely. This may be one of the situations that you call what, strange bedfellows. If you remember, I talked on yesterday about the progressives, and I'm talking about the Union of Liberian Association in the Americas. Then we have the Progressive Alliance of Liberia under the leadership of Barkus Matthews, who comes to Liberia and forms a political party. Then you have MOJA, the Movement of Justice in Africa. These are all different individuals that have now come into the cabinet. And we are in there trying to work, but I did mention very carefully that we all were trying to help these men and then move them toward the democratic process. So yes, there were these different little hitches, but we got along because while we were there, and I admit juggling for positions in the future, we did not have any internal conflicts, at least not open.
Now, within that cabinet, you've already mentioned there was a Dr. Amos Sawyer, wasn't there?
Amos Sawyer was not a member of the cabinet, but he was sent as president of the University of Liberia.
What about Dr. Henry Fanbula?
My good friend Dr. Famler became the Minister of Education.
And who was the Minister of Planning?
The Minister of Planning was another Moja individual, Dr. Tokba Nantipote.
And in terms of political complexion, those three men, what part of the political spectrum did they adhere to?
They, to a great extent, I can say, were Marxist-Leninist oriented.
But nonetheless, they were within the Doe government.
That is correct.
So within Liberia then, what was the supreme decision-making body?
The People's Redemption Council itself.
And by what method did they rule?
They ruled by decree, but don't let us forget that we're talking about military people. And while there were discussions, the most senior officer, there are times that you just do not challenge your superior. And so the top echelon of the council, that is the chairman, Samuel Doe, the vice chairman, the speaker, the secretary general, and the commanding general, at that tier, by tier I mean at that level, would probably make certain decisions and virtually pass it down to the rest of the council, because it was a strict military channel and chain of command.
Speaking of which, did that fact that this was a military administration have any personal consequences for you in terms of your own status?
Oh, yes. It did have consequences. And in fact, I mentioned that these were young men, but they were smart men. What they ended up doing to all of us, they said, great, now that you are a part of a military government, we will induct all of you in the armed forces, give you military ranks, and subject you to military orders. Now, all members of the council took the rank of lieutenant colonel upward. Members of the cabinet were all, and I use the word inducted. I had never at that particular time had any military training. We did not do any military training to get the rank. Up till now, I have never had any military training whatsoever. So we were made majors, deputy ministers for administration, were all made captains, and assistant ministers were made lieutenants. Now, the intent, what they said was that we will be subjected to orders. So when you receive an order, you had to follow it. And so members of the council were then divided up, where each council member, or maybe a group of 2 or 3, were placed in charge of ministries and agencies of government. So they became what they call chairpersons of certain committees that headed certain agencies. So, for example, if you were chairman of the People's Redemption Council Committee for Finance, so the finance minister reported to you. Now, I was at the General Service Administration, so I had a chairperson that I reported to.
Who was that?
His name was Robert Noukou. That's N-O-W-U-K-U, Noukou.
Now, your post as head of the GSA, in terms of power, how did that compare with other cabinet positions?
Oh, I would say it was a very, very powerful position. Very powerful in that I then had the authority to make certain decisions regarding supplies that ministries received, furniture for offices, everything that had to do with the functions of these ministries, agencies of government. had to come through my agency.
And how did you propose to run that agency when you took over?
I had read extensively about the operations of the General Services Administration in the United States. And so I set out immediately to try to rein in the agency in terms of being able to save money. At the time that I took over, in fact, before the coup, every ministry, every agency bought its own supply. So, for example, if one ministry wanted, say, an adding machine, he bought a particular brand. And so in the government of Liberia at the time, I realized that there were many, many different brands, and this was not serving the best interests of government. So I then decided to structure the agency in a way that we will begin to not just only save money for government, but to try to standardize equipment and other government items across the board. And this caused a major problem.
But did that policy work?
To a great extent it worked. It gave me, and that's what I meant by power, it gave us a lot of power, but it also created a lot of enemies.
And in putting through those reforms, were you supported by Doe and the PRC?
Yes. Yes.
Now, was this some kind of federalized system, Mr. Taylor, or was it centralized?
We, in our restructuring, proposed the centralization of everything. The argument was made, and Doe and the People's Redemption Council accepted it, that our proposition was this: look, if you standardize, there are several advantages. One, you can buy what we call bulk material at lower rates. The ability to service the equipment across government repairs will be easier, because if you are in an office and you have an Adler, for example, they used at that time a lot of Adler machines. If an Adler broke down across the hall and could not be repaired under any condition, it was easy to take parts from one Adler and fix another Adler. But if you are in one room and the guy next door to you is using a Canon, that's it if the machine breaks down. That will save. And so we introduced standardization. We also talked about bulk purchasing, and that brought about tremendous savings.
So in terms of the heads of individual government departments, is it the case that hitherto they had made their purchases on an individual basis?
Yes, and not only made their purchases as individuals, but prices were just so wide apart. One ministry could buy, let's say an example, let's say a Canon 250 adding machine would be reported for, let's just use a rough figure, $100. Another agency would probably show $200. And so this disparity was a major problem, because they bought individually and there were no savings.
And in reality, Mr. Taylor, what was the real root cause of those kind of disparities?
Well, let's not mince words here. This was just pure evidence of corruption, to put it bluntly. And And coming in and trying to correct it, this is what I meant by cause some enemies also.
Why did it cause enemies? You need to spell this out for us.
Well, corruption generally is when individuals do unlawful things and steal taxpayers' money and do the wrong things, and so it was a way that people they made a living. It was a way that, for example, a government employee working at any agency that had a monthly salary of, let's say, $200 really didn't care if he was in the procurement department, because at the end of the day, he was making thousands based on little deals he was cutting here and there. We got to find out that the invoices that were being reported through the General Auditing Office were all made-up invoices, and in fact, deals were made apparently where they were reporting one amount, but actually the real prices were different at the vendor. And by vendor, I mean the shops that sold those.
And so what was the reaction when you brought in a centralized system?
As normal with all changes, people resisted. They get angry. They were upset because it meant that they had lost their little, what they call in Liberia, 1-2-1-2, and no one would like that. I guess I'm going to be asked later what 1-2-1-2 means. Just a local, little corrupt. When you get your little corrupt thing on what they call on the side, they call it 1-2-1-2.
Now, did these or your control extend to, for example, government vehicles and the use of them?
Yes, everything, government vehicles.
And in seeking to control their use, did you come up against any particular opposition?
Oh, yes.
Can you explain that to us, please?
Before the revolution, a vehicle assigned to an official, a government purchased vehicle assigned to an official of government, virtually became his personal property. In the United States, GSA vehicles are marked, they are government property. In Liberia, it was virtually your property. I then decided that what we would do, we will mark the vehicles. I had even gone to the extent to say that after working hours, the vehicles should be parked. That was a no-no. Oh, no-no to that. But the president, and by president I mean the chairman of the council, took the title on as president. So I'm referring to Samuel Kanyando, and presidents before him took what you call trips around the country to hold executive council meetings. This is one of those meetings that I escorted the late President Talbot on, the same kind of meeting. Now, but the General Services Agency is responsible to making sure that the president on that trip had what he needed to use, whether it was vehicles, we took generators, everything that the president had to use, the General Services Administration had to take it on scene to be used. So I realized that every time we had to take a trip, we had to virtually buy a whole set of four-wheel drive vehicles. And by the end of the trip, whoever got those vehicles, say if the ministers were accompanying the president, he would think that the vehicle assigned to him as minister was I mean, had to be kept in such mint condition that he couldn't let it go on the bad roads, so he needed another vehicle to take him. But upon return, he would try to hold on to that vehicle. So we were just buying vehicles for almost every trip. So I went to the chairman, and I said to him, look, we can't afford this. So from now on, when it's time for your trip, all GSA vehicles being used by officials, I don't care who the person is, we will stop them and take the vehicle and use it for the duration of your trip. And so there were, and he backed it, and so there were some little scrimmages from time to time, because a day or two before the trip, we would set up roadblocks across the city with the help of the police and take the vehicles.
And were people happy to lose their vehicles? In that
Very,
way?
very unhappy. Very, very, very unhappy. And that's what I described as scrimmages would occur. But my colleagues they were majors. We were all majors. So they couldn't do anything to me. And again, I had the authorization of the president. So they just had to complain but stop at some point.
But did that make you popular?
Very unpopular. Very unpopular.
Now, you've explained to us yesterday how it was that those who took power came from the indigenous population and from the lower ranks of the army. Now, in terms of them now being in power, did that have any consequences for you in terms of you having to meet their expectations?
Oh, serious consequences.
How so?
My name is Charles Taylor. Now, Taylor in Liberia is an Americo-Liberian name. Now, for us at that particular time, and some members of the council that understood I also had Aborigines background, I was comfortable and they were comfortable. But for a vast majority of the council, and I'm talking about again the PRC, I was still considered a Congo man. Now, we'll probably get into that later, but this whole thing, there are disparities between the use of this country Congo. So I used to make the argument, if you say I am Congo because I carry the name Taylor and you know that my mother is also country, then you have a problem. So what I was seeing as at that time was, some of them said, here is this Congo man who is the head of the GSA, who does not want us to gain some status. And let me just explain what I mean by gain status. When the PRC came to power, there were the general belief on their part that now we were down, we are up, so we have to be brought up to a certain social status. That social status had to be in line with what they had seen and what they had experienced in dealing with the Americo-Liberians. So they were calling for things that they felt that they were entitled to because the Americo-Liberians before them had those things.
Things like what?
Vehicles. They wanted their homes furnished properly, and who would blame them? I surely had nothing against that, and still don't. They wanted vehicles of the status that other ministers that were Americo-Liberians had in previous governments. They wanted carpets, furniture, the whole, what we used to say in America, the whole 9 yards. Everything that they felt that the Americo-Liberian groups had when they were in power, they wanted that.
And who was to pay for it?
The taxpayers of Liberia. And this is where my problem started, where I felt that, yes, why it was proper to do it in the beginning, but some of them just kept extending it and extending it and extending it. And so resistance came about from my side, and to a great extent, Dole backed me on it.
Now,
Mr. Griffith, sorry, what is the meaning of Congo man? I'm not sure I understand.
Oh, the Congo is the same, Your Honor, as Americo-Liberian. They also call Congo. Yes, just like in neighboring Sierra Leone, you've heard about Creole. The Creoles are Americo-Sierra Leoneans, if you want to call it. Those individuals, the free slaves that came back to Sierra Leone and Liberia, are called, they are a different set. In Sierra Leone, they are called Creoles. In Liberia, they call them Congo people or Americo-Liberians.
now, in your role as head of the GSA, Mr. Taylor, did you ever have any cause to come in contact with the United States government?
Yes, there was the United States Agency for International Development wanting to assist the government at that time did a survey of ministries and agencies of government and appreciated what we were doing at the GSA, and did say at the time that the GSA was the best run agency of the government.
Any other contact apart from that? In your role as head of the GSA?
Yes, there was another little contact sometime, a little down the road that was, I would say, a little unfortunate, but it happened. This had to do with there was a piece of property that was being used by the United States Trading Company. The United States Trading Company was just a name given to one of the many little companies that were owned and operated by the Firestone Rubber Plantation Company in Liberia. The United States Trading Company sold American vehicles in Liberia and other American products, and occupied not just a building but a large piece of property in an area of Monrovia called United Nations Drive, near the Barclay Training Center, BTC, that I spoke about in my testimony here on yesterday, where the barracks is. Now, the United States Trading Company closed down its operations at that property, and it was turned over to the Liberian government, of which the General Services Administration, being responsible for securing properties, that came under the General Services Administration. Now, unfortunately, and I rarely use it unfortunately, the United States government had tried to use that piece of property as a major extension for its intelligence operations, where it was a large piece of property. Let me just say it was situated on, I would say, about a full hectare of land, not just one little lot. But this property is within 1,000 meters of the Barclay Training Center, the military barracks in Monrovia. Unfortunately, because it was owned and operated by the Firestone Rubber Plantation Company, the United States Embassy did not get the okay from the General Services Agency before it moved in on the property, had it fenced in, and had contracted to a local construction company in Monrovia the contract to renovate and upgrade the property. I objected and said that I did not feel that that property should be used for that particular agency that was
Which
supposed
agency?
to. It was just an extension of administrative and other facilities for the Central Intelligence Agency. And so I said that the United States was an ally, is an ally, and I will still say it's still an ally, and I have no problems with them. But I felt that even with friends and allies, there are still secrets, and that for the agency to move so close to the barracks, it was not proper, and that we should find another piece of property far from the barracks. They did not like this.
Who didn't like it?
The United States government did not like this. The embassy complained about it, and rightly so, I guess, because they had advanced about 300,000, I understand, United States dollars, to the contractor who had actually fenced the property in and had commenced work, and the work was stopped. Though the complaint was taken to Doe, Doe called me in, and I explained to him, and he agreed with me, but he pulled a little fast one on me. He then decides that he is going to send the matter over to the then Minister of Justice, Councillor Winston Tubman.
That's a name we've heard before.
That is correct. Tubman, we mentioned him on yesterday as being at the consulate in New York when I was a student that took it over.
So now he's Minister of Justice, is he?
In the Doe government, that is correct. Councillor Tubman rules that he sees no reason why the United States government cannot use the property. The decision is taken to Doe, and what I mean by he pulled a fast one, Doe disagreed with Tubman, agreed with me, but made the United States Embassy understand that all the matter is with Taylor. And I'm sure the United States ambassador should have known that there was no way I could disobey the president's order if he seriously wanted them to use that property. And so I was then put on a fiery line to keep saying, you know, we can't let it happen, and if you have a problem, go back to the president. But the president had already told me that they should not have it. And so that's what I mean by, so that was the second contact that I had with the United States Embassy at the time.
Now, this is in what year, Mr. Taylor?
This is around, I would say about, this could be about 81, late 81.
And were there any consequences later for you because of that?
Oh, there were some pretty mad Americans I know. And probably rightly so. They were upset, and I guess this later on proved to be why I would say I was later on arrested on extradition charges by them. They were pretty you know, angry.
Now, I want you to cast your mind back to January 1981. Did anything in particular happen to you in that month whilst in Liberia?
We are still going through this country Congo business. A lot of the members of the council, knowing my background, I knew that I was, if anything, half and half. They knew that. But others did not accept it, and they were still like in all organizations, some hardline members. And some of them succeeded in saying that the Congo people were trying to make a comeback, and that I, at the GSA, was a part of it. And so the Minister of Justice, who was still in Liberia, a very wild firebrand, his name is Che Chipo.
Spell that for us.
C-H-E-A, and Chepo, well, some people say Chipo, Chepo, I think it's C-H-E-A-P-O, Che Chipo.
And what's the ethnic origin of?
Che Chipo is Crown. I was arrested,
What for?
being a part of a conspiracy on the part of Congo people, Americo-Liberians, to return to power. I was stripped at my office,
What do you mean stripped?
my clothes taken off me.
Totally?
Well, no, I was left in my underclothes, and driven straight to the barracks and placed in jail,
Which barracks?
the Barclay Training Center.
And what happened when you got there?
During this particular time, I was placed in what they call the post, as in military post stockade, confused, not knowing what was going on. General Thomas Kuwongba, the commanding general, was not at the Barclay Training Center. He was at Habel,
Spell that for us.
H-A-R-B-E-L. Habel is the capital of Mangibi, M-O-U-N-T-G-E-B-I, Mangibi County, but is the seat of the Firestone rubber plantation in Liberia. He was sick in the hospital, and by this time, she is now my wife. I'm speaking about Tupi. I managed to get a message up to him. He was very upset. He immediately returned to Monrovia, drove to the post stockade, released me, provided for me members of the armed forces for my immediate security, and then drove, put the military unit at the barracks on alert, and drove to the executive mansion really in anger, and told the chairman of the council that he was very upset about what had happened to me. He knew those that were behind it. It was unacceptable that he had released me, and if anyone arrested me again, it would mark an end to the revolution.
Now, were any precautions taken for your personal protection thereafter?
Yes, I just mentioned he provided me a full military unit of one platoon of 44 men, fully armed. And the reason why he did this, he knew, before he went to the hospital, he had intervened on several occasions into this Congo country, Americo-Liberian situation, and he knew of the plot against me. So back in his mind, he also knew, and I think this is why he took such a strong move, he also knew that I guess Che Chipo had obtained the acquiescence of Doe before carrying that out, but that Chipo was on the front line, and so he took these actions, I guess in the back of his mind, realizing that even though Doe knew, but because Che Chipo was the front man, he took those precautionary movements, hoping that Doe would react, I guess.
So, what was your relationship with Doe?
Oh, at the time, I would assume that Doe and I had no real problems, but because of my days at the barracks, Kuwongba and I had grown closer than any other member of the council. Not to say that I was not close to a lot of them, but that I think being together for 3 months and helping him through the crucial first 90 days, we were very, very close, and I married what he would call his sister. In the Liberian setting, sister, we just, if you're from the same tribe or ethnic group or area, you are a sister or a brother. It doesn't mean biological. But I mean, he and other members of the council that were from the Nimba region, looked at me highly. And that was another move on my part. Yes, a so-called Congo man again that is marrying a countrywoman or an Aborigine. That again was very, very pleasing to a lot of them.
So, in terms of being able to speak to Doe or proffer advice, how did you get on with him?
I must be very frank and say fairly well. We had no real difficulties. I could speak to Doe freely. He still looked at me as this leader from America, even though I was working with them, and that I was always fair. And so when I had to speak to him, very frankly, I did.
And did he respect your views?
To a great extent, I would say, at least he listened to my views. Doe by this time is surrounded by a lot of his Crown ethnic people, well educated. And so while I know he listened to my views and respected them, but I know that he had to countercheck with very qualified people that he had around him.
Now, you may recall telling us yesterday that part of your motivation in lending your assistance to the coup was the hope and ambition that in due course the soldiers would go back to the barracks and there'd be a return to democracy. Did you discuss that with Doe?
Yes, I did. I did say to him that I felt that he could become one of the greatest Liberians ever if he, as a young man, a master sergeant, staging this coup, as terrible as it was, the things that happened, if he were to call for elections, return to the barracks, he would look extraordinary. He appeared to agree. He said, "Oh, I think this is a very good idea." I told him, I say, you will become the national, in fact, you will become the hero of this country. But, again, I say that there were some very qualified people around him. And I do not claim to be the only one that may have been advising him along these lines. I can't say for sure, but I'm sure, knowing how other progressives thought, I can almost say that others were advising them to return to barracks, elections that people might be able to turn to, democratic rule.
And did the Master Sergeant seem well disposed towards this proposition?
Well, in conversations he seemed, but again, the end results don't point to that because he didn't return to barracks. He participated and he said he won the elections.
And in terms of the foreign policy of the government, Mr. Taylor, what course did that take under the Doe regime?
Well, in terms of foreign policy, Liberia, like I said, has always been the stepchild of the United States. And that's what I meant when I said yesterday they could do more for us than they've done, and I hold this against them. Doe has executed coup, we're saying, I mentioned that on yesterday in my testimony, because of this apparent movement towards this old Soviet Marxist-Leninist situation. This was very pleasing and on the part of the United States, and they really opened up to the PRC and commenced immediately to upgrade their assistance to that particular government, and even it continued after Doe was elected. At the time, I was not in the country, but from all of the figures that we have seen, during the period from the PRC government to the end of the Doe era, after being arrested by Prince Johnson, the United States had invested $500 million in that Doe government. Now, that was more than all previous years combined of all other administrations. So you can just look at that and see if all other administrations combined did not get that kind of assistance, and during that short period, Doe got $500 million. It shows that in terms of policy, that the United States embraced Doe. And don't let's forget, we're still in the Cold War era. And so in terms of foreign policy, he like all previous, and I know all future Liberian presidents, will lean heavily toward the United States.
Now, from which ethnic group did Master Sergeant Doe come from?
Master Sergeant Doe is from the Crown ethnic group.
And you mentioned a moment ago him surrounding himself with a number of Crown advisors who were highly educated. Was that indicative of a policy followed by Doe generally?
To a great extent, I can say yes.
And how was that?
Well, when you look at what was going on at that time, imagine here's a young man, not educated. It was normal for him to try to bring people around him that could probably guide him very well. Tribal elements that he felt that would be sympathetic, and what we say literally, protect his back. And so he did. For example, I mentioned on yesterday, the Minister of State, the most senior member of his inner circle, was Dr. George Boley. He had a PhD in education, very sharp, very well educated man, a doctorate from the United States. And there were other members of the executive mansion crowd that were also very well. He had advisor, the former president of the union. I mentioned his name on yesterday, by the name of Bayek Bala. Very brilliant, sharp man. He's also Crown. And so I guess he needed people that could really protect his back. And he did.
Now, did your relationship with the Master Sergeant continue to be amicable?
At some point in time, there was a little, I would call a little gray area that developed.
How did that come about?
Doe, upon apparently deciding to stay on in power, realized that he had to make certain moves. Now, General Thomas Kuwangba, and any Liberian yesterday, today, and tomorrow will tell you, developed to be one of the most respected members of that government throughout. Now, Doe got into a position where he wanted to stay on. Kuwangba was one of those that had brought the general argument across the board that he needed to return to barracks. General Thomas Kuwangba is very strong. He is the commanding general of the armed forces. All the soldiers respect him. the civilian population respect him. He's in favor of a return to civilian rule. So Doe decides that he has to make a move by weakening Kuongpa's position. He then decides that the only way he can weaken Kuongpa is to move him, and it was a smart move, was to move him from the position of commanding general, move him to the Capitol building, the official offices of the People's Redemption Council that had been used by previous legislators, and make him Secretary General of the Council, which is just an office job. Put one of his own crown generals in charge of the armed forces, thus making Kuongpa weak and unable to do anything. Now, Doe is aware that some of us are very close to Kuongpa, and we will go to any length to protect him too. A lot of the members of the armed forces, upon the whispering of this particular move, decide that before this happened, Kuongpa has the loyalty of the army and the population, that Kuongpa should remove Doe. All of us agree. I agreed. A lot of us that were close to him agreed that this should happen. So Kuongpa now refuses to take the position of Secretary General, and there is a stalemate. Doe charges that he is, what they call in the army, this is insubordination, he said. And what they decide to do then is to put Kuongpa out of the barracks. By that I mean the BTC, and that if he did not accept this position, he would no longer be commanding general. By this time, there's tension developing in the country. Those of us that have agreed that Kuongpa should not go are standing our grounds, and Doe leaves the country, and we tell Kuongpa it's time to make your move. But this was a very nice young man. Kuongpa decides that he would do it, but if there were bloodshed involved, he wanted nothing to do with it. So those of us that knew Doe decided that we would leave before he returned from Europe and wreak havoc on us. And so I left, and others left. Kuongpa was eventually placed on a house arrest.
Now, which year was that, Mr. Taylor?
We're talking about 83.
Now, when you say you left to go where?
I left first to La Côte d'Ivoire and on to the United States.
Now, prior to leaving, had you experienced any other difficulties with the Doe regime?
Oh, yes. He moved on me also. Doe removed me from the General Services Administration and sent me over as Deputy Minister of Commerce.
When was this?
This was in 1983.
Why was that done?
Well, he said to me, after he did it, I went to him and I said, well, why did you move me? He said, well, you know, people are complaining. They are saying that you are taking money from the GSA and giving it to me, and that is not true. So listen, Taylor, go to Commerce, hold the deputy ministerial position, and within a few weeks, I plan to remove the minister and you will become Minister of Commerce. But the movement from the GSA to Commerce at the position of Deputy Minister was in fact a demotion, because the deputy minister was a captain and I was a major. So you're moving me from a senior position. It was a demotion, in fact. So he said, well, you can keep the rank because you will not be deputy minister very long. Because of your background, you are an economist, so we will have no difficulties in making you minister. So, but I didn't wait around for that.
Who was the deputy minister at that time?
At that time, the deputy minister was a gentleman called Clarence Momolu, M-O-M-O-L-U, Clarence Momolu.
Did you get on with him?
Oh, Clarence and I didn't really get along. He was very close to the chairman of the committee that controlled the GSA, the gentleman I mentioned, Robert Nwoko, and they were like brothers because Nwoko is from Lofa County, Momolu is from Lofa also, and they were like brothers. And so the deal, in fact, under the whole thing was, because the council members thought that I was supposed to be this Congo man, not giving them their goodies, the whole point was to bring one of their quote-unquote own to the GSA. So what they did was to move me from GSA as Deputy Minister of Commerce and move Clarence Momolu from Commerce to the GSA.
What do you mean their goodies?
As I explained, wanting to be raised to the level of the constant calling for cars and rugs and furniture and beds and all of these things that I mentioned earlier, they thought was necessary to bring them up to the status where they believed that the Congo people had before.
Now, in terms of the popularity of the Doe government within Liberia, were they still as popular by this stage, the stage you're talking about now, as when the coup originally occurred?
I would say no. There's a little tricky thing here that we must understand. Remember I mentioned that one of the progressives had gone to the University of Liberia, Dr. Amos Sawyer.
As president?
As president. Now, as the years passed, the University of Liberia, this is the Moja man going as president of the University of Liberia. The University of Liberia became a hotbed for ideas. And so, and it was not just American-Liberians at the university. We had a large number of people from the Aborigine population at the University of Liberia. So what Sawyer tried to do at the University of Liberia at the time was to begin to use the university as his base to begin to put out his own ideas and increase his popularity. So Doe is now working against the quasi-academic community. And so he's becoming unpopular now, not with quote-unquote Congo people, but people seeing that they needed to move from this military government into a civilian situation, commenced buying the idea that they must return to barracks. So we're talking about a period now of about 2 years. The idea is catching on that they should return to barracks because actually they were not producing the goods that the majority of the population expected of them.
Now, the university, you said, become a hotbed of ideas. Did that develop in any way?
Yes.
How?
Oh, they started minor demonstrations on campus. They started speaking out, and I'm talking about the so-called Aborigines, and a whole bunch of the students were arrested, and most of them were from the Aborigine population. One of them that was arrested at the time is a gentleman called Komene Wise. Komene, I think it's O-M-M-E-N-Y, and I stand corrected on this. We may have to write. Wise is W-I-S-S-E-H. Another that was arrested during that time is a gentleman called Ezekiel Pajibo. That's Ezekiel as normal Ezekiel as in the, I think it's E-Z-I-K-E-L if I'm not mistaken. Pajibo is P-A, I think G-E-B-O, Pajibo. Both of these gentlemen are crowns. Komene Wise is crown, Ezekiel Pajibo crown. They are arrested, charged with treason, and Doe wants to execute them. And so this is just to explain to you that there's this development, and not just from the Americo-Liberian group, but from their own group, because this academic community now sees that return to barracks must happen.
And apart from those arrests, Mr. Taylor, did Doe respond in any way to this budding student unrest?
Oh yes, he passed a People's Redemption Council order, a decree that barred any participation. I can't even remember all of the no's in that decree for that would bar students or anyone from getting involved. That was a decree, if I'm not mistaken, it's Decree 2A. That was very, very well not liked by anyone in the country. Very draconian.
How long did that decree remain on the statute books in Liberia?
Until I became president.
And then what did you do?
One of the first two things that I did as president, in fact, I think it was the first thing that I did was to publish an executive order barring that decree. The second thing that I did was during the tenure of the PRC, and even during the Doe years, there were massive confiscation of properties of all former government officials, and as an act of reconciliation, because they had not been formally charged, or there were no proof or any court proceedings against them, their properties were just confiscated and had just been occupied by individuals that did not own them. I returned all of the properties to those that had lost them.
Let's come back to the Doe regime now. Now, when those students were arrested, did you attempt to do anything about it?
Oh, yes, I did.
What was that?
I went to him and said to him that what they were about to do, in fact, the students had been deemed guilty, and there were cries from certain circles to execute them. And I said to him that that was the wrong thing to do. And I can remember saying to him that if you insist and you try to do this, I am out of here. I do not want to be in Liberia after this situation has occurred. I don't want to be around, because I told him, I said, it will be not just a catastrophic mistake, but that will probably mark an end to the People's Redemption Council government.
And did that make you popular with Doe?
Well, quite frankly, I would be fair to Doe. I would not say that on that particular incident, I would have become unpopular. No, Doe did not show any real resentment for that statement. But knowing Doe, you could hardly tell what he was planning anyway. But I do not think that I fell in any bad books with him for saying that. I guess he probably just listened and said, oh, okay, I'll listen to Taylor, and you know, and probably decided to do what he would want to do anyway. But that incident, I did not sense any major rejection. He got a little upset and he said, well, you see what they have done, and this is unacceptable, and these children, and this and that. He was a little angry, but he calmed down. But at the end of the meeting, I didn't leave from the office feeling any particular threat from him.
Now, some spellings. Commonly we say Commanywissech, Ezekiel Pajibo, Ezekiel, Pajibo, Pajibo. Just a little detail, Mr. Taylor. Commonly we say, is he still alive?
Oh, very much so. Commonly we say is alive and well. He has held several positions in the present government of
Present government.
of Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. And to the best of my knowledge, I think he was recently nominated as Liberia's ambassador to the Kingdom of Belgium.
Now, Quiwampa, you mentioned earlier that it had been suggested that Quiwampa should in effect lead a coup, yes?
That is correct.
Did Quiwampa attempt to do so?
Well, he agreed, but did not actually carry out the plan. He said that he did not want blood, and so the plan was just stopped in its track.
So, in late 1993, was Quiwampa still in Liberia?
I left Liberia in late 1993 personally. I left before Quiwampa. Now, Quiwampa, remember I mentioned, was under house arrest when I fled the country. I cannot say precisely when he left Liberia because he was taken from house arrest by some people to hide him, and he was in hiding for a long time. I don't know exactly because I was not in contact with him for a brief period of time. So I can't say precisely whether it was late 83 that he left or early 84, but I knew that he was in hiding and he had been kept by some very good friends of his, I understand.
Where?
I understand it started off in Monrovia. There were some Catholic fathers that had been accused of being a part of this whole thing. They were Americans, and Doe had always accused them. But Quiwampa was very much liked by everyone because of what he stood for. I understand that they had hidden him for some time, and he eventually left, I think went to Sierra Leone and then on to the United States.
What was he doing in Sierra Leone?
I'm not sure, to be earnest. I'm in the United States now, and I guess he's trying to maneuver his way to get to where he's supposed to get to, because I think he was trying to get to the United States.
Eventually, let's just conclude the Kwiwompa chapter, please. What's the remaining history so far as Kwiwompa is concerned? Let's just concentrate on him for a moment.
Kwiwompa travels to the United States.
Were you in the United States at the time?
Yes. When he did get to the United States, I was there. By this time, I have been arrested. This is in...
We're coming back to that.
Yeah, okay.
But,
But I'm
let's
in the
just
United States.
concentrate on Kwiwompa.
I'm in the United States.
And what happens with Kwiwompa?
Kwiwompa is actually with these two Catholic fathers. I remember one of the name, Father Hayden, that Doe had...
Spelling?
I think it's Hayden, Father Hayden. And he is with them. And he's also in contact with another Liberian by the name of James Butte. He is presently chief, I think, correspondent for Africa that works for the Voice of America. They are together, and it is apparent that Kwiwompa begins to put his act together as to what he wanted to do back home in Liberia.
In what way was he putting his act together?
He began planning his move back to Liberia to remove Doe.
And what do you know about those plans?
Well, only what I was told. Doe had reached a point where even some of our best friends wanted him out. So Kwiwompa goes to America. He's with Father Hayden and the rest, and he's working along with certain agencies.
Which agencies?
Kwiwompa's movement is backed, I would say, by the United States government.
My question was very simple, Mr. Taylor. Which agencies?
Well, he is working with the CIA at the time to help him get back to Liberia.
And so where does he go after the United States?
Straight to Sierra Leone.
To do what?
To train, plan, and be armed for the invasion of Liberia.
And who's assisting him in doing that?
I would call his managers. Father Hayden, plus I do not know the immediate names of the handlers from this agency that I just mentioned, but I know he's with Hayden, and back in Sierra Leone, he's working directly with Dr. Henry B. Fambule.
And who's the president of Sierra Leone at the time?
He's General Joseph Momo.
And what actually takes place in Sierra Leone at that time when Kwiwompa goes there?
Kwiwompa goes to Sierra Leone, and all deals are made for the training in
Training of whom?
Of military people.
From where?
From Liberia.
To do what?
To overthrow the government of Liberia.
And where in Sierra Leone were they training?
They were training just outside of Freetown.
Who was training them?
The Sierra Leonean government used a gentleman by the name of Mohammed Doumbouya, who, and I'll spell that if I can, Doumbouya, there was a unit of the Sierra Leonean police, and I'm sure the Honorable Counsel here knows the SSD, Doumbouya, that I know personally, was used and instructed to train the forces that were about to invade Liberia. So they were trained under the command of Doumbouya.
And then what happened after that?
They invaded. The arms were bought was supplied by the president at the time,
So the arms were supplied by whom?
by the Sierra Leonean government,
Yes. To do what?
to invade Liberia,
For what purpose?
to seize power.
And overthrow whom?
Samuel Kayando.
And so that's the Sierra Leonean government doing that.
That is correct.
In when?
This occurred, this initial attack occurred in, I think it's 1985, if I'm not wrong.
Can you help us with a month and day?
Oh, no, I just can't recall right now. I'm in the United States.
And help us. What progress did that make, that attempt?
General Kurongpa, Thomas Kurongpa, leads the operation into Liberia. They are, to a great extent, successful. They enter, they seize the radio station, everything, make broadcasts on the radio. But there was something funny that happened on their way in. And now this is a very important part of it because, again, that upset me because I am, in fact, Thomas did not listen anyway. But they go in on their way at the border. The commander of the unit that is leading the troops is killed at the border, not by Liberian government forces, but by one of the member of the invading force. Now, strangely, what was going on, it is believed, and I have heard nothing to the contrary to say that it is not true, that Kurongpa had been used by certain progressives within the invading force. And let me clarify this for the judges. Kurongpa arrives in Freetown. He has to recruit and train Liberians. So he has to draw this stock of Liberians from Liberia. And so he contacts almost every progressive. Amos Sawyer sent the famous journalist in Monrovia called Tom Kamara was there. The present chairman of the Election Commission in Liberia, Jimmy Flomoyen, was there. These are the Moja Marxist Leninist individuals. Now, so Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was contacted. Burma Famule is there, so his people come. So what is happening now is that that conglomeration of individuals within the organization have their own agenda. And I want to be very clear about this. I'm saying that this is believed, but there's been nothing to the contrary to suggest that it is not true. Their objective was to use Kurongpa to stage the coup, eliminate him, and Moja would take over the country. So the commander, a gentleman called Bia, B-I-A-H, Bia is killed on the border by a member of that group. So they get into Monrovia. The coup is successful. General Kurongpa goes to the radio station, not even knowing that his commander was killed at the border. Is left naked. Camp Shefflin, that has come up in the testimony, and the spelling is in the records here. Camp Shefflin, a military barracks just outside Monrovia on the Robertsville Highway, is where you have one of the strongest battalion, I think it's the 1st Battalion of the Armed Forces of Liberia, loyal to do, commanded by a Crown officer, and most of the people there are the Dole loyalists. Camp Shuffling has not surrendered to the new government. They forget about shuffling. Secondly, Kurongba assumes that men have gone to the executive mansion. Dole is still at the executive mansion. Nothing happens to him. So eventually, the soldiers from Camp Shuffling move into Monrovia with massive force. The Kurongba people scatter. Kurongba is sought, he is captured, he is killed, he is eaten by the Crown soldiers, and that is on the records, all over the records to that. And then the revenge mode sets in.
We'll come to the revenge mode a little later. But I'd like us to just pause for a moment and deal with a couple of spellings. Firstly, James Butty, B-U-T-T-Y. I'll have to wait for the others. But in any event, you'd mentioned that you yourself has left Liberia. Before we have the short adjournment, I wonder if you could assist us with this. Why did you leave Liberia?
I left Liberia when General Thomas Kurongba said that he could not order the armed forces to move in because it would involve bloodshed, because he was sure that a certain segment of the armed forces that Dole had loyal to him, especially the Crown and other groups, would resist. There would be bloodshed. He did not want it. I knew that things would get bad after Dole returned from Europe, where he was visiting, and so I left out of fear.
Mr. Taylor, help us. Did you have any other difficulties at that time in terms of your role as head of the GSA?
None whatsoever. Had no difficulties up to that point, because when I left Liberia, I was now Deputy Minister of Commerce. I was not at the GSA when I left.
Before you left the GSA, had there been any questions asked about the propriety of your dealings in that role?
Oh, that is correct, yes. The new guy, Clarence Mamadou, that moves into the GSA begins what he calls a massive investigation as to what had occurred at the General Services Administration.
Yes. And what was the outcome of that?
Well, I really don't know the full outcome, because up until the time I left Liberia, he was still investigating. But what had arisen at the time, he was concerned about funds that had been paid 8 months before his arrival at the GSA for equipment for the government of Liberia that had not arrived.
Now help us. How many such allegations were made about you and your role as head of the GSA?
Well, as far as I know, the allegations came from Clarence Mamadou.
How many of them?
I know mainly of one for the payment of $900,000 to a firm in the United States.
And put in simple terms, what was being suggested about you?
Oh, he was trying to suggest that I had personally embezzled money.
How much?
$900,000.
Had you done that?
No, I had not.
When you left the Liberia, were those investigations still ongoing?
They were still ongoing.
Did that investigation have anything to do with your flight?
No, not at all, not at all. The payment in question had been made 8 months before I fled. No. it was very clear that had it not been for this military operation that Kurumpa failed on, and I'm using the word failed, I would have not probably left Liberia at that time, because quite frankly, I was sure that I would have been made Minister of Commerce. And the investigation would have been carried out, and they would have found out that all of the proper procedures had been used. And what do I mean by proper procedure? Orders were placed by the GSA, payments were made through the Central Bank of Liberia, the vendor had received the money 8 months before this particular situation. So if there were any questions that would have been answered, it would have been by the vendor, who had not denied that he had received the money. So I had no problems with that.
Well, help us with this then, Mr. Taylor. If, as you're telling these judges, you were not guilty of any wrongdoing, what do you say was the motivation behind those allegations?
I know that Clarence Mamadou wanted to destroy me, and some of the other guys wanted to, but they would not have succeeded. It was purely to destroy Charles Taylor.
Why would they want to destroy Charles Taylor?
But don't let's forget that we're in this mood of what? This Congo man that is doing very well, who is so respected and loved by a lot of members of the council, we need to break Taylor. And that's what they wanted to do.
And was this being done with or without Doe's approval?
Quite frankly, I cannot say with any degree of certainty that this was done with Doe's approval. To be very fair to this gentleman, look, I know Samuel Doe. These allegations, if Doe was behind the allegations when they first came out, number one, he would have dismissed me from the GSA instantly. I believe that there were other individuals moving in there, because having been president myself, when the president is really behind something, really behind something, I mean, you would almost know. I mean, I don't think Doe easily could have said, oh, there are allegations, you are dismissed, and you will remain out of office until you answer to these allegations. But he did not even comment on it. The executive mansion did not do any releases on it. And so I would say that this was not of Doe's doing, no.
I'd like you to hold that thought, because I note the time, and I'm going on to another aspect of this, Mr. President.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Grievous. We'll take the short adjournment now and reconvene at 12 o'clock.
All rise.